Good evening, everyone. We're going to go ahead and call the regular meeting of the Board of Finance to order. It is 5:49 p.m. Thank you to Simsbury Community Television for taping and our clerk for doing the minutes, as always. We'll begin with the Pledge of Allegiance. Please join me. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States
of America,
and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, one day we're going to get really good at that. We're not quite there. A couple of housekeeping items before we move on to public audience. First of all, I want to recognize and thank Amy Merriweather, who unfortunately is out sick this evening. So we will be tabling some items for a special meeting next week. Without objection, we will set aside the following items. Item 5, setting the mill rate. Item 11, town quarterly financial report. Item 12, Board of Ed quarterly financial report. Item 13, Finance Director's report. And item 14, approval of the minutes. If there is no objection, are there any objections? Hearing none, the action is decided upon.
And do we know which day we're going to have the Board of Finance meeting tomorrow, next week?
We don't yet. Maria is polling board members. We're waiting on Derek and a few others to confirm their schedules and try and get the majority of us there, but it will be Wednesday or Thursday. Although not here, Amy, I do want to recognize Amy for a job well done on the quarterly reports, which we are tabling and we'll review at the next meeting. It's a lot of information. We tried to make it in a readable format, so I'd ask board members at the next meeting to come with suggestions on formatting changes. You'll see that we added public audience. Tonight's public audience was added because we have a supplemental appropriation for ARPA, and guidance from the Treasury is to be as open and as inclusive as possible. The public audience is a limited public forum to receive comments on the agenda items or Simsbury finance items, and will be limited, as is our regular course, to 3 minutes per person. We will follow the town's anti-harassment policy and Robert's Rules of Order, and personal attacks are not prohibited. Personal attacks are prohibited. But that, Kelsey, can you let us know if we have anyone here for public audience?
Yes, we have Miss Joan Coe.
Okay, Joan.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I would like to thank the Board of Finance for adding public audience to their agenda. With an unsettled economy, everyone should be able to voice concerns regarding the budget and the effect on their daily lives to our elected representatives. The ARPA Act, American Rescue Plan Act, has infused $3.765 million of free, quote, free money into Simsbury's general fund. Free money is never free. There is always a cost to benefits derived from the expenditures. The Flower Bridge design work, pickle courts, replacement for Terrafil Park Pavilion, backstop, Weetog backstop, Curtis to Terrafil Survey Trail, dredging the town forest pond, BOE, HAVC, climate control upgrades, library control, Simsbury Farms playground, police service dog, BOE, 2 social workers, 1 social worker, youth services are included in the ARPA expenditures. Many of the costs associated with the projects have long-term spending that will increase future budgets. The Board of Finance should not accept any capital expenditures without an analysis of future costs. Many of the approved costs for the Latimer Lane School will be insufficient. The Board of Education should supply the Board of Finance with several scenarios for shortfalls in funding. One of the scenarios should include placing a hold on the project. It appears that the management of Aspen Green, 20 Huck Meadow Street, is raising rents by $200 a month, with additional costs to the renter for gas, electricity, and additional charge for water. These increases will be forthcoming for all rental units in Simsbury, creating a financial burden on the residents. The reevaluation of homes this year will reflect a bubble of increased values that are not sustainable. Many people will be burdened with increased taxes on present value. These bubbles in the economy should be evaluated by the Board of Finance as the town's taxing authority. With prices of all goods and services increasing, mortgage rates increasing, the stock market losing ground daily, and recession imminent, with wages not keeping up with inflation, the Board of Finance should review all present and future expenditures to alleviate the tax burden on the residents and businesses. All of my comments will be posted on Simsbury Patch, Twitter at Joan Co, and Facebook. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Joan. Kelsey, is there anyone else?
No, that is all.
Okay, so then we will move on to the Latimer Lane project update. As background, the Latimer Lane School renovation project was approved in fiscal year 2022 for a total appropriation of $36,792,406. There's an anticipated budget overage of about 1.3 million, which Jason, I believe, is here and will address. At this point, we're not being asked to approve a supplemental appropriation, only to make a motion that the town has sufficient funds to cover the overage if it chooses to do so at a later time through the normal budget process or as a supplemental appropriation. It is necessary for the town to go out to bid. This is necessary for the town to go out to bid and comply with state requirements. Going out to bid will enable staff to evaluate the true project overage. If needed, after bids come in, the town manager has indicated that we should anticipate a supplemental appropriation to be made in the next budget cycle. Bond counsel has indicated that anything we spend above what was originally approved will need to go back to referendum, which we can easily do at the next budget referendum for fiscal year 24. This may change as we get more information, but as of right now, this is the best that we understand it. I wanted to start with, I think Jason is taking the lead. Is it Jason taking the lead? Who can walk us through the challenge and the request?
Sure. So at this time, what we need are actual numbers. We need the bid to go out so we can get pricing back from the street. We're unable to do that unless the town is capable of paying for what's being bid. So initially, when we reviewed the numbers, they had come in the area of around $3 million higher than the original referendum. They went back, the design team went back and moved certain items into the alternate section so we could still get pricing on them, but we need the base bid to be at or below the referendum pricing. So we've pulled that back as much as the design team can, and we're still at a $1.3 million shortfall. Again, this meeting tonight is not to approve that funding. It's just to establish a memo for the state to say that the town is capable of paying this amount. So it would be a future date where we would go to referendum to do this.
Thank you. I'll open it up to board members for questions with the reminder that we're not being asked to approve the expenditure tonight. This is just an assignment to enable them to go out to bid, and we will have an opportunity again to ask questions when it comes to us, but it is a good opportunity to give Jason and the Board of Ed a heads up of what type of questions to anticipate to the extent he can't answer them tonight. So I open it up to board members. Linda.
Can you tell us what some of the cuts were that you did make?
Sure. So one of the items that we've pulled back is the geothermal heating system.
Yeah, I read that.
Yeah, initially in the design spec, the engineers felt that price differential wasn't going to be significantly different. It was higher, so we've pulled that into an alternate section. It was also the town's Clean Energy Task Force that had spoken to the Public Building Committee and pushed for that as well. Other items included significantly deeper programmatic cuts, reducing square footage of the overall building, for instance, things that can't be put back or can't be bid as alternates. So as we've gotten to this 1.3 number, we don't feel there's a way to make those particular cuts without significantly impacting instruction.
So the only thing that you cut was the geothermal then?
No, there was a list of items. I don't have that in front of me right now. I can provide
If I can jump in, there was the external garage that was moved to it and out alternate. There's some plantings that were removed. There's some external seating that was removed. Basically, wherever we could pare back without impacting the direct instruction that takes place within the building was trimmed a bit here, a bit there. The switch of for example, a gymnasium floor from a wood floor to a poured rubber floor netted another $50,000. But a lot of it was the external works, the plantings, the seating, both indoors and outdoors, was definitely stuff that was targeted to bring it back as far down as we could.
Yeah, that was my question about, are there different materials you could use, like the example you used of the flooring, and can you have it bid both ways so that you
So like the hallway flooring, for example, when it goes to bid, we'll get bids for multiple different levels of flooring. So there's a chance that some of that could come further down. Fingers crossed.
Okay.
Yeah, thanks for that, Michael. I appreciate the detail there. I am curious, without going into too much detail, but again, to give you guys a sense of what we might be asking, just, useful life of a wood floor versus a, poured rubber floor. And then I'd be really curious to know. Sorry, I don't know. Are people hearing the same thing I'm hearing? I'm sorry. So the other thing with the geothermal, I'd expect that there was some sort of estimated payback period on that geothermal. So, to the extent we could, spend to save, I thought it's interesting I'm using that, but those are things that I'd be interested in knowing, such that we're not compromising quality, as often happens with, tight budgets. And through the value engineering of a project, it's a concern of mine. So I don't want to pay for less of a quality project, and then certainly I don't want to pay for a smaller building. So to the extent that we're losing square footage, I'd call it square footage per pupil. I would want to know, and it's probably not a big number, but I would want to know kind of what that overall reduction in footprint is on the buildings as well.
So I can answer a few of those for you. One of the things that they were able to preserve was the chilled beam heating and cooling system, which, Jason, correct me if I'm wrong, we could at a later date switch to the geothermal, and that system would support that. That was one of the things that the building committee wanted to preserve, was not abandoning a system that could later be connected to both a solar field and a geo field as well. And to not too fine a point at like that $1.3 million, when we looked at cutting square footage, it was a $250,000 piece, pulled out about 1,000 square feet. So if we look at that 1.3 million, essentially what it amounts to is the six new classrooms would essentially have to be cut. So we'd have to really significantly go back to the drawing board if we were to try to cut a $1.3 million worth of instructional spaces. It's essentially the new wing at the end of the third grade hallway.
I would also add the importance. I'm sorry.
No, go ahead, Jason. I apologize.
I was going to also add the importance of getting the bid on the street is to get some real numbers associated with this. And then we can come back and talk about a potential for, do we want to spend X dollars on flooring, for instance, when we know the cheapest of flooring requires the highest of maintenance and in the long run costs the most. And it's the same thing with the geothermal, paying more upfront, pays less later. These are certainly the discussions we plan on having once we have bids in hand.
Bert is not visible to me, but I know he had some questions. Bert, are you on the line and do you have questions?
Just while Bert's thinking about it, just in terms of allowances, do you have a max on your allowances for the, I guess, known unknowns, as I call them, on the hard costs?
referring to contingencies built into the construction, or what's the?
No, not contingencies, but allowances. So, for example, on your flooring, you may be able to decide from multiple different products, or such that you predict that you're going to spend this much, and then you have an allowance typically on that just to be able to upgrade. So you kind of know what you're going to spend. Contingency is more your unknown knowns, or your known unknowns, whereas the allowances are something you're going to spend. I just wanted to know if you had a cap on those allowances, and how close to a GMP are you on your construction drawings?
That I'd have to go back to the construction design team.
Okay. Those are questions we'd be asking.
Bert, are you here now?
Yes, I'm sorry. I missed the beginning of this discussion. I was dropped from the call. So I don't want to repeat questions we've heard, but and I heard the last part of the discussion, so I gather I at least have some information about what types of changes have been made, but it's not clear to me what that is the Board of Finance appropriated for and what's being cut from the project. And I'm also confused about where the geothermal project fits in with the appropriation.
I think Bert is going to scope of project that you referenced. It looked like you expanded the scope of project, which is something that I think raised questions for board members as to process and who has the ability to approve changes in scope of process beyond what the residents voted on. I know this was a question we asked during the approval process. What sort of environmental efficiencies were they considering? And our board was interested in hearing about options and operating costs. And the Board of Selectmen at the time and the Board of Ed did not take us up on that offer. So if you could talk about the scope of project, I think you addressed it a little bit, Bert, before you got in, where you felt that initially the scope of project wasn't going to change the cost, and then you found out that it was, and that may be the answer. But if you could speak to that a little bit.
Sure. In meetings with the Public Building Committee, the engineer had discussed the potential to go to the geothermal system for an amount that was not largely out of what was already being looked at for the heating system. That's basically the answer, is that it was something that we were interested in looking into, and then we heard feedback from the Clean Energy Task Force within the town, also suggesting that was something they were interested in. But ultimately, it was the Public Building Committee's decision to make sure that was added as at least an alternate. Okay.
And I think Derek's exactly right. Our board is going to be interested in operating cost savings when you come back to us at that point. Are there any other questions from other board members?
I just have one. I building on Linda and Derek's point about we don't want to do cheaper materials, or materials are going to increase the cost of maintenance. But is it safe to draw from your statement that the ensuing project will accommodate the same number of students and will not impede in any way the quality of education that they will receive because of these cuts?
Absolutely. I mean, are we talking that 1.3 number?
Yes.
Yes. I think it's if we cut beyond that 1.3 number, where we would start having to cut into things that had direct programmatic impact.
Okay, thank you.
And so I have a process question for Lisa or Maria. So we're going to give them approval to sort of go forth and write a letter to the state saying we're good for the money and get bids. But let's assume for a moment that we really do need an additional 1.3 or even more to do what we're talking about. That's something that has to go back for another referendum. And when would that be? And is that a separate referendum from any other vote in town?
I'll start and then let Maria finish. Yes. So any amount above what was approved at referendum, according to bond counsel, will need to go back, any small amount. We can do that at the next just regular budget hearing. That's the most obvious time to do it because we go to referendum anyways. We could do a special referendum.
But that's a year from now.
The one thing, yes, we could do a special referendum if it's needed in the interim. Or the one thing we cannot do it is during the November elections because it's a federal election and we do not have the machine capacity to do a separate referendum at the same time. But Maria, would you like to add to that?
I think you covered it really nicely, Lisa. Something that did surprise us a bit, and Judith is going to reduce this to a written legal opinion for us, was that even if we have the cash to cover that increase, it would still need to go back to referendum.
Right. So, but it could actually, I mean, they're not going to need the money, so to speak, or a guarantee of it for until potentially next May when we have another regular referendum. Is that what you're suggesting?
You mean an appropriation, right, Linda? So we're going to do I think the recommendation tonight is to do an assignment of capital reserves because we haven't received the next tranche of ARPA. And an assignment is basically an accounting designation. It's not an appropriation that we are thinking about using, that we have this money and we're thinking about using it towards Latimer. I hope when it comes time for an appropriation, by that time we'll have ARPA money, and my hope is that the ARPA money will be used for this. And
so, but in terms of a vote, a referendum, it could potentially wait until next May to be voted on by the public. I mean, I just kind of hate to think of us having a going through the expense and having a referendum for which probably about 100 people will show up on just this one topic.
If we wait until May, I mean, you might as well throw the bids out the window because prices are going to move again.
That was my question.
And that's actually, yeah, sorry.
Lisa said,
so when's the construction start? When is the expected construction start?
In the November timeframe.
Yeah.
November 2022?
Correct.
Okay, good.
Wouldn't we
Okay.
have to do it before November? Because Lisa, you said we could do it at the next normally scheduled, but wouldn't we have to do it before we sign a contract?
well, so not if you're doing the add-ons. I mean, there are different ways you could structure it because don't forget we have approved 36,000 or 36 million. So depending on how you structure it, but it is a risk, and I'll let Maria speak to that. And I think that risk will be evaluated ongoing. I think once we get the bids, and if we decide we need to go ahead and do an early referendum, we can. It is unfortunate we can't do it in November when there's going to be a huge turnout. But,
Yeah.
Right. And you may recall that we typically bond for cash flow and also for larger projects such as the Henry James project, we bonded in two separate bond issuances for that project based on cash flow. So again, that also provides a little bit of flexibility for us.
But you're right, Linda, that's something we'll monitor. And once the bids come in, we'll have a better idea as to whether it can wait till next May or whether we need to go earlier.
Okay.
But that's definitely. And then Jason, I don't know, we have not seen schematics of what it's going to look like. When you come to us, can you please show us pictures? I think it's helpful for the public to visualize and for us to visualize as well. Okay. So are there any other questions from board members? Mike, Jason, or Maria, do you have anything you'd like to add?
No, just thank you for letting us come out tonight and talk with everybody. It's truly appreciated.
Well, thank you, and thank you for all your efforts. We're looking forward to seeing it, and we will request a tour once it's.
I was just going to say, I'm happy to host any Board of Finance meeting once this is finally done.
Excellent. We will plan on it. With that, I have a motion effective May 17th, 2022 to assign $1,364,624 of the Capital Reserve Fund to meet the state of Connecticut's ability to pay requirement and move forward with the Latimer Lane project bid process. Someone like to make that motion?
So moved.
Moved by Derek Peterson.
I'll second.
Second by Linda Schofield. Any further discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay, that motion carries. Thank you, Mike, and thank you, Jason.
Thank you. Lisa, I will
Thanks again,
email you
guys.
some schematics and some renderings, okay?
Oh, excellent. I'm looking forward to it. Thank you.
Have a
Appreciate
great
it.
night, everyone.
Okay, good night. We are tabling the mill rate, so we'll move on to item 6, which is the tax collector suspension list. I don't know if folks have had a chance, but I did send the Connecticut general statutes where this requirement comes from that we have to do every year. And that's Connecticut General Statutes, Chapter 204, Local Levy and Collection of Taxes, Sections 12-165. We have to review this. And Maria, if you'd like to walk us through it quickly, and then we'll go ahead and vote on that.
Oh, Lisa, I wasn't prepared to speak to that. So if folks,
Is Colleen here?
no.
Well, I'll just do it then.
Okay, great. Sure. I'll let you take that. Thanks.
So the statute that I just mentioned requires the Board of Finance to approve a suspense list prepared by the tax collector, which is Colleen O'Connor, which is before us tonight. And basically what a suspense list is that we remove it as an asset from the town. It doesn't mean we stop pursuing collections of it. It's an accounting thing and that we're required to do by law. The key point is that they do still plan on trying to collect some of the uncollected taxes and trying to find the financial impact. The total amount.
90.
90,000, yes. I'm on the wrong page. Here we go. Yes, is about $90,653. Regular motor vehicle and supplemental motor vehicle taxes comprise most of the suspense list, and all of the motor vehicle tax bills have been sent to a collection agency this month. So there are still attempts to collect it. The accounts will remain collectible for 15 years. People ask, why do we publish the names? And we're required to by state statute. So that's in your packet. That's why they're listed.
So I have a question. Number one, I found it interesting that Doris Day was on the list, but presumably not the former actress. But my next door neighbor is on the list as well, and they have plenty of money to pay their bills, I'm sure. So
she's not talking about me. I'm not on next door.
Yeah, so I think part of the reason it's publishing, because a lot of people, it may be that their address changed or their phone number or the tax collector couldn't get it or they got something and it was thrown out. I don't know people's motivations. It's not for us to judge them. But if you see someone on there and you can call them and say, hey, by the way, I just saw your name, that usually does it. So we can do that.
Well, so that was it's probably it's a relatively small amount, probably car related as are most of these. But yeah, that was my question is, can we assist in any way?
Yeah, it does happen. At one point I got a tax bill from Plainville and we've never lived in Plainville. So things do get
might be an error.
Yeah, things do get confused. So, but with that, are there any other questions?
I'm curious, is either the number of people in arrears or the total amount extraordinary, or is this what we normally find?
Yeah.
So I can't remember. We've done this every year and there's always more than you would think. But Maria, does this strike you as more or less?
No, not necessarily. No.
Look normal to me, having seen this year after year.
Thank you.
We could get follow-up, for our next meeting to see, because that's an indicator of people's ability to pay taxes for future budgets, I guess.
But I think most of them are people who have moved away and they're like, I'm not paying car tax to a town I don't live in anymore. One of those kind of things, except my neighbor still lives here.
Yeah. So we'll move, do our best and thank Colleen for putting this together. And for folks who are wondering why we do it, we're required by statute, and why we do it the way we do it, that she's following a very strict regulation that shows how she has to do it. So that's why. All right. Are there any further questions? Okay. May I have a motion effective May 17, 2022 to approve the suspense list in the amount of $90,653.95 and authorize the tax collector, Colleen O'Connor, to transfer these accounts to the suspense tax book?
I'll move that.
I'm Bert Helmand, I so move. Oh,
Oh, Bert, would you like to second that?
yeah, que sera, sera, I'll second it.
Okay. So we have a motion by Linda, a second by Bert. Any further discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed, please say nay. Okay, that motion passes unanimously. We will now move on to item 7, which is the appointment of the auditor for the audit. This is something, again, we are the appointing authority of the auditor. We had a 3-year contract, which was renewable for a 4th year at the same price. Given the costs that are going up everywhere, this is advantageous to us to keep it at the same price. So it is coming before us to appoint our current auditors, which are Clifton Larson Allen, as the town of Simsbury's auditors for the fiscal year ending 21-22. Are there any questions on this? We've all had a chance to meet with the auditors. Okay. With that, may I have a motion effective May 17, 2022 to appoint Clifton Larson Allen LLP as the town of Simsbury's auditors for the fiscal year ending 2021-2022?
I'll move.
So,
And moved by Art, seconded by Derek. Any further discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed, please say nay. The motion carries unanimously. We'll now move on to a supplemental appropriation request from Public Works Equipment Purchase. That's item 8 in your books.
I don't know, Maria, if you wanted to lead off or.
Actually, I'll lead off, Tom, and then I'll turn it over to you and Maria. This item was approved as part of the fiscal year 23 budget. Permitting the purchase early during the fiscal year 22 budget cycle will save the town about $7,800. The item is being funded with Town Aid Road, and because being purchased in fiscal year 2022 tonight, it would be removed from the fiscal 23 year budget. But again, this is using Town Aid Road dollars, so it doesn't impact the general fund. And with that, I'll turn it over to Maria and Tom to review that with one caveat. The supplemental request document said we are requesting the board to authorize a bid waiver to allow the department to purchase the equipment from a local dealer that allows for the savings. We confirmed with the town manager that the Board of Finance does not need to approve that. That only needs to be approved by the Board of Selectmen, and they have done so. And with that, I'll turn it over to Maria.
Great. Thanks, Lisa. I know we had talked previously with the board that it's been rather difficult for certain equipment purchases, rather difficult for certain fleet purchases that sometimes we might, put an order in and it could be months and months and months and months before we receive it. So I really wanted to thank Tom and Kevin for their work on this particular piece of equipment, because we have the opportunity to actually receive it in a timely manner and at a lower price if we go ahead and purchase it now, as opposed to waiting to this summer. Tom, do you want to go ahead and just elaborate a little bit more on this particular purchase?
Sure. I think this is just one where we're fortunate and we have good relationship with our local dealers. They basically let us know that they had a piece of equipment in the yard that met our requirements. We priced it out with a couple other options, and the piece that we're looking to buy, this Hitachi, is exactly what our crew needs, and it's significantly less than some of the other major brands. And by purchasing one that's off the lot now, it's going to save us that $7,000 to $8,000. And more importantly, that piece of equipment will be working on town roads this summer, as opposed to having to wait 9-10 months to get a piece of new equipment if we order it.
Thank you. I'll open it up to board members for questions.
Just curious, what's the equipment?
It's a small front end loader. It's replacing what would be a traditional Bobcat wheeled loader.
Tom, what year is it? Is it brand new? Is it a 2022 or is it from last year?
It's a brand new, and I believe it's a 2022.
And the estimated 25,000 that you'll get as a trade-in, has that been quoted to you?
That it is. Yep. They came out and took a look at our existing Bobcat wheeled loader. They were happy with it. It's about 10 years old. And so it's to the point for us, it's had a, useful life, but it's starting to get to the point where its reliability is a concern. So that's why we're looking to upgrade to the new equipment.
Yep, makes sense.
Maria, process question. Because we are being asked to approve the 80,000 as a supplemental appropriation, and we're anticipating 25,000, that would be a new revenue. Do we need to do a supplemental motion to approve the supplemental revenue expenditure, or that's just going to go into savings, so we don't need the motion?
Are you referring to the trade-in value?
Yes.
I'm fairly certain we had budgeted a trade-in value for the 22-23 budget. Hang on one moment. So I'm just going to refer back. Give me 1 second back to my screen that has the amount for tonight.
I believe you are correct. We did anticipate the trade-in value, and I think, and you stop me when I get out over my head into Amy's world, but I think because we're trading it into the same place that we're buying it, it's a little bit different than if we were selling it through an auction, which is something that we did consider with this piece of equipment. We originally thought we were only going to get about 20, and when they offered us 25, it was really above the value we thought we would be able to get.
Yeah, so I guess my question, do we need to, just 1 sec, do we need to reduce the amount we're appropriating, or do we treat it as revenue? Just if you could clarify what we do with that trade-in value.
That would, oh gosh, I'm so sorry. That would definitely be a good Amy question.
You need it today?
I'd recommend we.
Sorry, go ahead.
I would recommend we appropriate the net amount. I don't know why we'd appropriate more.
Right.
But I don't know the nuance.
I want to, I'll go back and double check, but I think for the 22-23 budget, we budgeted the net amount. Does that sound right, Tom? I can try to go back and double check, but
yeah. And I always thought there was for some reason, because I always think things, more in like our home finances, that, net, it's going to be this, that's all you need. But I believe in the past we've had to appropriate the full amount, but again, that's definitely more of an Amy question.
Okay. Let me see if I can get an answer for us.
So this is just like speeding up the purchase by a couple of months. Is that so it falls in the current fiscal year as opposed to the new one?
Yes,
exactly.
It saves 7,000, which is, we'll take it. That's top of pollinators.
So that point of clarification. Sorry, Linda.
So it'll be. Who's yelling in the background?
Folks, if you're not on, can you please mute?
There we go. So that made me lose my train of thought. So it just creates a savings then in next year's budget that might help us with something else, right?
So it's in Town Aid Road. So that just keeps the balance at Town Aid Road the same. It's just it's just a timing
I
thing.
forgot it was TAR. Yeah.
Yeah. But that's an important point, because it's not a double spend. It's not spend it this year. And by the way, in fiscal year 23, you can also spend 80,000. That then goes away as represented by the town manager. Maria, if you need a few minutes, we can go on to the ARPA while you're doing that.
Yeah, that'd be helpful. I'm just confirming with Amy. So if you wanted to do that, I guess that'd be great.
I just have one other comment. One other comment would be that, if we do end up appropriating the full 8750, that doesn't, to clarify again, that doesn't allow them to spend any more than the 55,750 in my mind.
So the appropriation would, but
yeah, I don't agree with that. It should not give Tom additional purchasing power by appropriating the full amount. He's telling us it's a $25,000 trade-in. I don't want to agree to spend any more than the 55,750 on the piece.
So there may be a way to reword the motion to reflect that. And that's what what Maria and Amy are working on. Because I think that's everyone's intent. But the only question is, how do we technically do it? There's no question that I think people have expressed an interest in approving the project. The question is more technical. How do we do it to meet your concerns?
Agreed. Okay, thanks.
Yeah, and Amy said it depends on if it's an actual trade, then it's just the expense, and we would only need the net. But if they treat it as if we're selling it, then we would have a revenue and expense, and we would need the gross. And that, Tom, I'm not sure if we have that level of detail in terms of how they're going to treat the trade-in value.
No, and the other thing, I mean, again, I think the whole point to this is we brought this forward as a way to save the town money. It's something that we take very seriously. The only thing is, if we want to, go really close to that 55 number, I would just round it up a little bit to include, we'll usually buy first year filters, that kind of thing at the time of purchase, because we get them at a discount. But again, we're doing this as a way of saving the town some money.
Maria, is there a way we could frame the motion as is, but add with the expectation to the motion that there will be 25,000 offset by 25,000 return?
Lisa, couldn't we simply provide an appropriation of the 87,000 on the condition that it be expended in connection with a trade-in in which we receive, say, at least $23,000?
Yeah.
Does that work for everyone?
Yeah.
I don't know what filters cost. I can appreciate you, Tom, in the group trying to save money, but I don't know what that additional cost is. So I have no basis to agree to that, but I'll be flexible on a couple grand, I guess.
Tom, are there any concerns with Bert's proposal?
No, I'm sure that would work fine. Like I said, we understand the direction you're giving us, and even beyond the motion, we have a relationship, and I understand exactly what the intent is. So we're not going to abuse that privilege.
Well, thank you. And of course, if you run into problems, just let us know. Communication, we're all working towards the same thing. And if it turns out it's not as expected, just let us know. All right. So Bert, I know you're driving, so you may not have access to it. So I'll start the motion, and then Bert can help me out with the last part of it. Is there someone who would like to make?
I'm parked.
So go ahead and make that motion.
Well, I don't have the document. Why don't you begin?
Okay. I'll ask for a motion effective May 17th, 2022 to approve a supplemental appropriation utilizing town aid road funds for the purchase of a skid loader in the amount of $80,750. Bert?
Subject to the condition of, strike that, in the amount of $87,750 in a transaction in which the town trades in or receives in trade-in at least $23,000. How's that?
Okay, and that $23,000 will be returned to town aid road. Is that right?
Correct.
Okay, so we have a motion.
I'm usually better than this.
That was pretty good.
I so move.
Okay, we have a motion from Bert. Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Thank you. Further discussion, Derek?
Yeah, we have a quote for 25,000. So if we're going to get the 20, I would just say that we will add $2,000 to $3,000 for the additional filters and maintenance items for the skid steer for the first year. If we know we're going to get 25,000, then we shouldn't just say and at least 23. I mean, is that fair, Tom, or is this like a done deal?
I missed that. Was that?
Is it like basically you're gonna like you could get if we agree to this, the supplemental that it's a done deal. The 25, basically the 25.
Yeah, it's a done deal. We issued a tentative purchase order. We actually have the piece of equipment sitting in our shop. We're just not putting it to work. We have the ability to bring it back if we end up not doing the deal. And we have the ability to do this because we have a long relationship with the vendor.
Okay, so I
would accept Derek's amendment to my motion.
Okay, so it's now
So it's
with the expectation of receiving $25,000 in trade-in value to be returned to Town Aid Road. Okay, we have a motion, a second, accepted a friendly amendment by Derek, changing from 23 to 25,000. We have a first. Linda, do you accept that?
Yeah, sure.
Okay. Any further discussion?
Do we need to say something in addition to give Tom the ability to spend that couple $1,000s on the filters he wants?
No, because that's included in the full amount. Right, Tom?
That's my understanding. Yeah. And again, it's not just filters. It's that, it's just the first year of maintenance,
All
that
right.
type of thing.
I misunderstood. So great. Then we're done.
Okay, so we have a motion. We have a second. Is there any further discussion? Seeing and hearing none. All in favor, please vote aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, that motion carries unanimously.
thanks, Tom.
Okay. Thank you guys. Bye-bye.
We then move on to ARPA and the Farmington Valley Health District, which is a supplemental appropriation. This was not included in the original budget. I really want to commend Wendy and the Board of Selectmen and Maria and Melissa and Amy for bringing as much of ARPA as possible through the budget process. That's really a great process and very transparent and open. It's not always possible to do that. These numbers were not ready during the budget process, but they are part of a regional collaboration and a regional commitment towards the health district. The amount that we are being requested to approve is $100,056 using ARPA dollars. It's a proportional amount based on the population with other Farmington Valley towns. And this has been approved by the Board of Selectmen. Supplemental appropriations require recommendation by the Board of Selectmen and then approval by the Board of Finance. I'll let Maria walk us through what we anticipate those dollars will be useful for the public, although some of that is in your packet.
Great, thank you. So the Farmington Valley Health District Board of Directors did endorse the attached proposal. Myself and Melissa are currently on the board representing Simsbury. And essentially, the health district was really trying to focus on a number of needs. One of them was a vehicle purchase that would then be used to assist with transporting, vaccines and things of that nature. That was very difficult for them during the pandemic. They didn't have adequate transportation for that, so they were often borrowing from towns where they could, using personal vehicles. So this would provide for a more permanent solution for that. It also provides for some technology needs that they found that they had, as well as some communications work. And then they were also looking to fund a community outreach worker with some of the funds as well. And that is a position that is common in many health districts. And it's something that would help them meet their 10 statutory requirements, as well as responding to some of the challenges we saw during the pandemic, particularly in regards to mental health resources. One of the other things I did just want to point out is that this would be our proportional share. So we, for normal operating budget, normal expenses, we're billed on a proportional share based on our population. We are usually the largest town or second largest town. Our population in Farmington have very comparable populations, so we tend to pay the most. But again, it is proportional based on our size. And they approached this in a manner similar to the second round of stimulus funding, where they made a request to all of their 10-member towns. And you may also just recall that because we do not have a municipal standalone department, the regional health district does serve in that capacity for us. But because they're a regional entity, they did not have the ability to tap into the ARPA funds directly from the federal government, which is why they're coming back to their 10-member towns.
Lisa,
I keep muting myself. But I'll open it up to questions from members of the board.
Did It almost might be a little circular because different towns have different, budget cycles. But do we know where the rest of the town stands, such that if they don't get R100, like, what? And I'm also curious how they didn't know that, they wouldn't have direct access to ARPA funds, such that it couldn't have been part of our original budget discussion. Is there anybody here from the health district to discuss this?
No. So
Maria is on the board though.
I am on the board though.
Oh, okay. All right.
Yeah. So, I'm sorry, one of the questions was about budget process, right? So they are working with 10 different towns and 10 different budget timelines, which is a little bit challenging. So, and all 10 towns have a different, method. Some it's a referendum, some it's a town meeting. And so, they really did their best to try and put together a proposal, which is again why this was somewhat, off cycle for us, but not necessarily off cycle for some of the other towns. And then some of the other towns, again, for either charter requirement or purposes, they're not necessarily handling their ARPA requests through the budget process. In terms of where some of the other towns stand, a number of the towns have already approved this request, and some it's still in process.
And just
Thank you.
a reminder to folks, Wendy did highlight this as an expense for our board to anticipate coming off budget cycle during the budget.
Okay.
There's a lot of things out there, but this was one on her list.
That's what I was just going to say. We still have a few others that we're still working through on our finance subcommittee. And we've tried to make sure you guys knew that they may be coming at some point because we just didn't have the figures at the budget at the time of the budget.
So 80% of this budget includes staffing, which is an ongoing expense past our ability to spend ARPA money potentially. So I didn't know if the board had any opinion on that. I felt strongly when we were talking about the Board of Education spending, basically or allocating ARPA money to OpEx is really not something that I'm crazy about. So what's the likelihood that they will not come back to us for roughly $120,000 to $130,000 a year to continue paying this community outreach coordinator?
So it goes to the CLIP question that this board is always interested in hearing about. Thank you, Maria.
Sure. So a couple of points on that. Oftentimes, once a community outreach worker is in place, there are often grant opportunities that the health district would be able to tap into to partially, fund this sort of a position. But you may also recall that right before the pandemic, they had launched their strategic plan, which included some planned per capita increases for all of the member towns to start to help improve some of their staffing in areas such as this to help meet the 10 statutory requirements that they were not able to meet with their previous staffing needs. So this does also tie back to that strategic plan. Some of that was delayed because of the pandemic.
And is all of their funding through grants, or would this community outreach coordinator also be looking at other fundraising opportunities?
I would say it would be most likely a combination of grants and an operating expense.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Are there any other questions?
I just want to say to Derek, if I can, just to make you feel better, that same question came up with our group. I can't remember if it was a finance subcommittee or when it went to the board, but we did ask about the continuation of that role.
Okay,
the concern.
Thank you.
Okay. Are there any other questions from board members? Or Maria, do you have anything more you want to add? Okay. With that, may I have a motion effective May 17, 2022 to approve a supplemental appropriation for funding for the Farmington Valley Health District in the amount of $100,056.
So moved.
Moved by Linda. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Seconded by Art. Any further discussion? All in favor, please vote aye.
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 Any opposed?
Opposed as presented.
Opposed by Derek Peterson. The motion passes by majority. Thank you, everyone. Then moving on to supplemental appropriation of SCTV paid, which is item number 10. This is an item that was scheduled for funding next year. There was some confusion during the budget process and it didn't make it on this year's budget until the very end. We received information that indicated, but that was after the Board of Selectmen had met. It is being requested earlier to leverage private donations that will enable them to get this work done in a timely fashion. So it's a public-private partnership. Getting those donations was very effective. It was planned. We're being asked to fund this through capital reserves. But in speaking with the town managers, it's certainly her intent that current year's savings will be used to fund this and replace the dollars taken out of capital reserves. At this time, we're not doing the quarterly reports, but we are anticipating a minor amount of savings and that those will be put back into reimburse the capital reserve fund.
So this is speed up, right? I mean, this would have been funded in the next year's budget and we're just going to do it in the current year.
Correct. I mean, if we approved it, it's subject to voters and our, the board's approvals. But yes, it was a standard project that was scheduled for completion next year.
Yeah.
And it is in the CNR CIP. Are there any other questions? Maria, did you want to add anything to this?
Just, Lisa, I think you mentioning the fact that this was a really wonderful opportunity to leverage the private donations that came in, both financially to Simsbury Community Media Television, as well as they received a pretty substantial equipment donation from ESPN. And again, I think just again, sort of leveraging those donations that came in perhaps a little earlier than we had anticipated for budgeting purposes to move forward with this work that was planned.
So the savings that this creates in the 23 budget will then be used to replenish the capital reserve account if the money's taken out of there?
Well, no. So the savings from the current year budget, we're anticipating current year savings to reimburse the use of capital reserves. So we're going to use capital reserves. We're anticipating somewhere between 170,000 and
so it'll all be done within this year's budget, but it creates a savings because it was already in next year's budget.
It won't be next year, so it will create an opportunity or savings in next year's budget. Yes.
So the question was, what will that savings be used for?
So different capital reserve items, or not at all, or taxpayer relief, depending on what the Board of Selectmen. I mean, they have a list of more things to fund than we have the ability to fund. So this
right,
will
sure. Always
do that, right?
All right, fine.
Any other questions at this point? Okay, with that, may I have a motion effective May 17, 2022 to approve the supplemental appropriation for Simsbury Community Media Studio capital improvements in the amount of $45,000 as presented?
So moved.
It's by Bert. Is there a second?
Yes.
I will second.
Art is seconded. Any further discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay, that motion carries. And then with that, we are going to move into executive session to discuss union negotiations. Present in executive session will be Board of Finance board members, Maria Capriola. Is there anyone else who will be joining us?
I don't think so.
Okay.
I'm going to leave. Bye.
Okay.
Hi, Wendy.
All right. With that, may I have a motion to move into executive session?
I move.
So moved. Second.
Okay. Motion by Art, second by Linda. Any further discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
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 Thank you.